Breaking news in an open case in the Mueller probe. Trump advisor Roger Stone just took the stand for the first time. He was just grilled by a Mueller prosecutor for the first time, and he was rebuked and silenced by a federal judge. We are reporting on a truly wild day in federal court where Judge Amy Berman Jackson took Trump aide Roger Stone to task. There's really no other way to put it. Pressing him in public court proceedings on whether he was today lying to the court. And then she shut him down, supersizing a partial gag order into a full gag order against Donald Trump's longest-serving advisor. What does that mean? It means tonight I can report for you Roger Stone can't say anything else in public about his case. The judge also suggesting this is the final warning, a clear suggestion the next time that Stone would be punished, it will be with immediate jail time. Now, Roger Stone is a defendant in this Mueller probe, so these developments happening late today are obviously progress for Bob Mueller, and they come in an extraordinary afternoon that revealed the legal limits on Roger Stone's very well-known effort to turn serious proceedings into a Baroque theater of the absurd. This normally voluble, dirty trickster turned mournful and morose as he pled for mercy from the court while taking the stand, again, as I mentioned, for the first time today. And when Stone did leave, as you see here with his freedom hanging by a thread, it was noticeable he did not say a word in the departure you see on your screen from the courthouse. Marked today as the official end to Roger Stone's attempts to publicly attack the Mueller probe and the judge or the FBI, as he did in releasing this video and going on and on about his arrest. There has been weeks of those attempts to use that footage. Well, we are now a long ways from Roger Stone's antics that you may have seen on television when he was first indicted, from the Nixon victory salute to holding impromptu press conferences at the courthouse. Now, let me tell you, all of this, obviously, right now, which is big news no matter how you slice it, is happening as Washington and the legal and political worlds around the country buzz over whether this long-awaited Bob Mueller report is coming soon. But these issues that all came to light today are a reminder that even if large parts of that probe are heading towards some sort of resolution, this Roger Stone case, which touches on WikiLeaks and alleged potential attempts to collude, it's open, it is alive, and it is putting heat on the Trump world, which makes understanding today's developments very important. So let me take you through some of them in detail. Roger Stone came in today and began by telling the court, quote, "I'm hurtfully sorry for my own stupidity. It was a momentary lapse of judgment to post a picture which was seen as a threat to this judge." And then Stone said, "I'm having a hard time putting food on the table and making rent." That very well may be true, and many defendants make those kind of arguments in court, but not usually to try to mitigate a potential threat to the federal judge overseeing their case, because hardship does not explain that kind of conduct at all. And this judge, let me show you what happened. She didn't buy it. In fact, she told the court and Mr. Stone if he really felt bad, if he knew he'd made a mistake, then why did he continue, quote, for the next 2 days to talk about how you're being treated unfairly? How is that consistent with what you're telling me now? She pressed him. And Stone then responded saying, well, I didn't have malicious intent. Let's stop right there. That's a key inflection point. Stone claiming he did not intend to actually threaten the judge, which could be true. But the judge rebukes him for the obvious problem with that argument in a world full of people who could be moved or incited by Stone. So the judge says here today, do you understand it could have a malicious impact? And Stone replies, well, that's what I'm saying. So he's sorry about the impact that he says he didn't mean to ever risk causing. Stone also cagey in these dramatic proceedings about how that picture, which was seen as a threat to the judge, was online at all. Because this is also new. A Mueller prosecutor grilling him in court for the first time and saying, okay, quote, who published this photo? And Stone admits, quote, I did. And the judge asks, did you not just tell me under oath that someone else posted the photo? And Stone then says, well, quote, I didn't choose the image, I posted it. And then he wouldn't say who did pick it, and the judge went in hard, saying, an individual who you cannot identify selected a photo that you posted. And then Stone says, yes, other people used my phone. And when pressed on how many volunteers or other people he has Stone then says about 5 or 6 people, but he wouldn't say in these hearings today who they were. Mueller prosecutor then gets in and says, quote, "You can't remember the people who worked for you 4 days ago?" And Stone says simply, "No." Quite a performance. This is the reality part. Stone was doing the reality show part. We're in the reality part today. And the judge said that reality was a problem. Let me show you exactly what she said. Quote, "These were deliberate choices. I don't find any explanations credible. He couldn't keep his story straight on the stand." That's a polite reference to potential perjury. And then the judge rules, "I find that released under conditions without modification, he does pose a danger that Stone can no longer speak publicly about the case or the participants. No statements, radio, TV, reporters, blogs, letters to the editor." And then this is key. She warns Roger Stone late today, "Today, I gave you a second chance. This is not baseball. You don't get a third chance." This was another procedural victory for Bob Mueller. And the translation of that last line is quite clear. The next time Roger Stone tries anything like this, any further enforcement of his gag order will be put on him while he's in jail. I want to begin tonight with former Watergate Special Prosecutor Nick Ackerman, who actually interviewed Roger Stone in the Watergate case at one point, and Wall Street Journal reporter Shelby Holliday, who's covered the Russia probe and a lot of the dealings around Roger Stone, including talking to the people who are now his alleged victims in the tampering. Nick Ackerman, what went down in that courtroom?
What went down in that courtroom was a very serious matter. You had Roger Stone lying right to the face of a federal judge, lying on very material items like who posted the photo, why he posted the photo. I mean, this is an extremely serious matter.
When you hear a federal judge who's not a Mueller prosecutor, but a federal judge say to him and say to the court, he can't keep his story straight today, is she implying that he could commit a new crime in that courtroom?
She's saying he's lying. It's simple. He lied. That's what she's saying. He couldn't keep his story straight. When you can't keep your story straight, you're lying. Secondly, this is extremely serious. I mean, the idea that he could be inciting other people to commit violence against a federal judge is a very real threat. We've had a history in this country with several federal judges who have been killed because of people who had a grudge or felt that they didn't get a fair shake or felt somebody didn't get a fair shake. This is a serious matter. Secondly, what he's trying to do is influence the jury. This is exactly the same thing his buddy Donald Trump has been doing for the last couple of years. And he's been doing it with some success. I mean, if you look at what happened in Virginia in the Paul Manafort trial, you actually had one juror who hung on certain of the counts that were brought against Manafort. And this was all done right in the same week that Manafort's trial was going on. Donald Trump was saying the whole thing was a witch hunt. Paul Manafort's a great guy. And what does this juror say? It's a witch hunt. That's why he didn't vote for conviction on certain of those counts.
Was this bad and embarrassing for Roger Stone today, or was it also, in your view, progress for Mueller?
It's both. It's progress for Mueller because he's basically put Roger Stone in his place. And it's bad news for Roger Stone because, in a way, this is like baseball. The third strike, and he's off to the slammer.
Before I get to Shelby on the reporting side, one more legal piece for you, which was very interesting. We always report every side of the case. And sometimes people don't like that, and I always explain to people, it's not about what you like. If you want to understand where a court case is going, you have to look at both sides. But tonight, what I'm about to read sounds like something from Mueller, but it's actually the Roger Stone side. That what he did was, quote, indefensible. That's not the prosecutor's demanding the gag order. That was the best, quote unquote, defense his folks could come up with. Take a look again. I want viewers to understand exactly what went down. Judge, why won't this happen in the future? Fair question if this is a problem. Stone's own lawyer. Sometimes a person learns a lesson, especially when a person's unrestrained in his speaking. It's indefensible. I agree. I'm going to repeat that. It's indefensible, Nick. Then, let me read Judge Jackson, quote, I agree with you there. What does it tell you legally when his side is not saying this is explainable, this was possibly misunderstood, but just it's indefensible?
He just has to fall on the mercy of the court. I mean, he has absolutely zero defense. In fact, the fact that he lied on two key elements here that the judge didn't put him in jail. I think he's extremely lucky. He's the only
And that goes to the big question. Why didn't the judge just put him in jail today?
I think what happened was that her last gag order was a very limited order. It only prohibited him from making statements outside the courthouse. If she had put into place at the time a full gag order, he would have gone directly to jail. Do not stop, go. Do not collect $200.
That's interesting. And this is something people forget. You're speaking about why the details matter. They may not matter to some of the people on the outside, but you're saying that because the judge tried to strike a balance, and we covered the balancing interest on this show, that it was narrower. And so because it was narrower, this is his last strike, as she put it. A very interesting analysis. That's the law. Shelby, on the facts, on where this case is headed, what did you see as significant today?
Well, before the hearing, I was reading some of Roger Stone's previous Instagram posts, some of the things he'd been saying leading up to this hearing, and a few things stuck out to me. I mean, just a few days ago, 5 or 6 days ago, he posted a thank you note of sorts to Judge Amy Berman Jackson saying, "I appreciate you allowing me to keep my First Amendment right, and I will be judicious about what I say about this case." Well, today, the judge came back and said, if this weekend's conduct was judicious, it would be foolhardy of the court to take no action and find out what injudicious is. And she talked about, inciting violence, even if Roger Stone himself isn't violent. He also told the judge that he didn't recognize the symbol as crosshairs when he posted it. If you scroll back through Roger Stone's Instagram feed, he has repeatedly used crosshairs in imagery and in comments to talk about how he himself is in the crosshairs of the Mueller probe. He knows what crosshairs is. He's posted about it. He has one on his forehead in some of his pictures. I mean, it's very hard to wiggle your way out of a comment like that. So I think some of the things that he has said in the past, and the judge has been paying attention. I mean, she paid attention to his media comments over the weekend. She asked, well, if you immediately regretted posting that photo, why did you go defend it time and time again?
Right. She called what in the law they call BS on all the things he was saying, and BS can turn into perjury, which is a new potential charge here. Both of you stay with me. David Corn, Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones has been all over all these stories. David, when you look at the larger picture, you're our guy in Washington here on the top of the show. Everyone in Washington's buzzing around, is this Mueller report coming to an end? We covered that a lot last night, and what does that mean? And then you go right back into the courthouse today, and it's like, wow, these Mueller prosecutors, they were on the job today, and the Stone case is far from over.
Yes, I mean, we still don't have a clear indication of what the Mueller report is even going to be. We've talked about this before. Robert Mueller has no obligation to produce an expansive report explaining all that he has found. He does have the ability, or under the Justice Department regulations, to do that if he chooses to, but he doesn't have to do that. And then what happens to the report is also not clear. It goes to the Attorney General. It's supposed to be confidential. We don't know what happens. So he's only supposed to do any type of report at the end of his investigation. Now, they only busted Roger Stone a couple weeks ago. They presumably got access to his devices and computers that could give them weeks of more investigative work to do. We still don't know if they got everything, they followed up every lead that they got out of Michael Cohen, or what they did get out of Paul Manafort when he did cooperate before that that agreement broke down. So I don't know. I mean, from my view, it looks like there's still more work to be done. Right. And there's no reason to think they're going to wrap up other than the reporting that we've seen. So
David, I want you to weigh in on another piece of this. And you, like the rest of the panel, have proven quite intelligent in analyzing these issues. So I hate to serve up a really dumb question, but it's part of my job sometimes.
Go ahead.
Roger Stone, like now a star of the Empire show that's gotten a lot of attention, was always of the view that any attention is good attention. Take a look at Roger making that claim.
My name is Roger Stone, and I'm an agent provocateur. By Stone's rule, it is better to be infamous than never be famous at all. Stone's rule.
I have to ask you, has that proven to be true for him? Did that prove true in court today?
Well, Roger has always liked a circus, and he's always fashioned himself a tough guy, a dirty trickster who gets away with stuff. Well, that's all well and fine, but not in a federal criminal case, right? Because you don't get to control it. It's not about the spin. It's not about the circus.
Right.
It's about right and wrong. And he's at the heart of portions of Mueller's case.
Right.
He helped amplify the Russian disinformation during the 2016 campaign. Their denials that they were involved in hacking. He believed it and circulated
Right.
that. Why was he colluding with them on that? And of course, the key question in the case, and you've covered this, is why did he tell the world that Randy Credico was his go-between with WikiLeaks when it actually was Jerome Corsi?
And we interviewed both of them
I know,
to
you've
get to the
interviewed all
bottom of
these
that.
people.
Hang
But
with
what-
me. I want to give
Okay.
Shelby a bite at the same question, same apple. Did it work for him, this idea that it's just great to get press no matter what?
No, and I actually wonder if this hearing today did him a favor in pointing out that your shenanigans will not fly in court. Your spin that you use in the media and that you use online, it will not work here. I wonder if his lawyers are rethinking their legal strategy, because Stone intends to fight all of the 7 counts against him. And
you're using the word strategy loosely at this
here
point.
today, we see him up on the stand.
I mean, this was
Didn't
the
go very
opposite
well
of strategy.
for him.
Yeah,
Right, so
it's fascinating. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.